Zoom recording, share screen. And thanks everyone for doing this part of the work. I think it's great to kind of see. It's nice to reflect on all the work you've done. And so, Emma, I just wanted to see, so if you wanted to say the name of your artist, and then we'll flip through some of the works and you can tell us why you picked the works from this person.
Yeah. I really love this artist, Fernando Amorsolo, since I was elementary, because he was really famous in the Philippine, in the Philippine culture and arts. So I really love his works because he showed to us, or he depicted Filipino uh, heritage, Filipino culture and arts, and he is really in love to it. And he always used oil on canvas. He integrate the chiaroscuro. It's a Italian word. He always used that on all his works. Chias is light, and then scuro is dark. So it's a combination of the light and the shadow, or the dark. On his, if you will notice all his works, it's there are parts that he really conveys the light, and then the contrast of the light and the darkness. Yeah, so these are all his works. So the first one, the the afternoon meal.
Hmm?
The afternoon meal of the rice workers, who he painted that on 1951 on oil canvas, and it won first prize at the New York World's Fair. So he's really a very good artist, and when he paints, it has really something to do with the Filipino culture, and he's really, he's really proud of it, something like that. Being a Filipino, of course, well, he really applies his whole being as a Filipino on his work. So whatever things that we have in our country, or whatever things that whether if it's behavior, or the common behavior of the Filipinos, the traditions, and then the culture, he really he shares it through his works. You can see it on all his paintings, and he's really proud of it. And as an artist too, being a Filipino, of course, uh, I learned to adapt his style, because one thing is because I'm proud of our culture, I'm proud of our arts. The kind of art we have in the Philippines is should be proud of. So that's why in my case, you notice in my works, I really love, even without uh, doing, even I will not base it on his work, or I will base it on Amorsolo's work. I am really proud of being a Filipino on my work. So whatever I experience in the Philippines, that I really enjoy, especially with our culture, with our traditions, I really love to paint it. Although sometimes some are really hard to paint it, but I really love to convey what we have as a Filipino. So yeah, this is the national dance na tinikling in Barrio. Barrio is a Spanish word, because we were colonized by the Spanish for 500 years in the Philippines. So from 1500s 1900s, the Spanish were in the Philippines. We are colonized by the Spanish people. So that's why our culture has the influence of Spanish arts. So during the time of Amor Solo, um, because Spaniards, the people who are from Spain, or the officials from Spain, they encourage, people, the natives, to come with them to Spain, especially if you are gifted in arts. They give them something like scholarship to study in Madrid, and then train them to become a famous artist or a very good artist in the future. Yeah, so Amor Solo is one of them. And then the other artist is Juan Luna. Yeah, Juan Luna is older, I think, than Amor Solo. Juan Luna is one of our heroes, but he's also a sculptor, politician. So he adapt the romanticism and realism on his work. And his one work became famous in Madrid when he painted the Spolarium.
Mm.
Yeah. So the Spolarium, here. This is the explanation, because I cannot
Sure.
explain it well. Here. I cannot see.
I think it just was a little bit off to the side here, but if I stop share, you might be able, I could read it if you want me to.
Yeah, please.
Sure. Let's see
So
what,
that we can have just a short, in, I mean, on his
sure. Yeah,
work and
it's the
style.
Spolarium is the kind of painting that lent itself to the patriotic needs of the Filipinos, projected a nationalistic symbolism that helped rouse the Filipinos to rise up against the political oppression of their Spanish colonizers. The Spolarium represents various emotions being portrayed, especially during that period wherein people are too brutal and vicious to value the importance of life.
Mm-hmm.
How huge an impact it leaves to a lot of people, um, and this being presented by the woman in the portrait. What it's
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's there. So in general, that I really like Juan Luna as an artist,
mm,
because he inspires me that, whatever sentiments, whatever feelings, whatever things that they experience, you can show it through your painting. You can express it through your paintings. So you can paint with it's really hard sometimes to paint without inspiration, right? Something that inspire you, or the reasons why you paint that thing. So that's Juan Luna. He really expressed himself, his sentiments, during the time, to the government we have in the Philippines during the time of Spanish era.
mm,
So he also loved to use oil on canvas, and in completing this spolarium, he spent 8 months to complete the painting. Um, and his bravery, as a person, as an artist, conveyed on his work on the spolarium. And then the last one,
mhm.
yeah, the last one is Pablo Picasso. I really like him because of he's really, for me, he's really an intelligent and creative, and what else? Resourceful artist. He doesn't, when it comes to, using mediums, he used different kinds. He created his own medium. He he he, um, he did not just used, the common mediums,
Right.
yeah, he focused, I mean, he tried to create, another mediums, to mix to, the common medium like oil, something like that. So
Mhm.
as I read his life as an artist, although, at the latter part of his life is not really acceptable for me, because he was womanizer, but his style as an artist really inspired me a lot,
Right.
to become more creative and to create more and more,
Mm-hmm.
to become. And I noticed that all his works is really analytical. And although I cannot do by this time his works, but I am aiming that someday I could adapt his, even just a little stuff
Mm-hmm.
he had.
Like, are you specifically thinking of cubism, like this idea?
Yeah, the cubism. So I like
Okay.
I like geometrical figures,
Mhm.
because he used that to all his works. Yeah, I
Mhm.
want to really to pronounce this Les Demoiselles Avignon.
Yeah.
that's,
Everything.
that's yeah. So I don't know how to pronounce it, but I really like that painting uh, that really became famous during his time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it did.
Pablo Picasso,
Mm-hmm.
one of my dream artists someday.
Very cool. Thank you for that introduction of the artists, the materials they were using, and also the things that you were interested in possibly doing. Thank
Yeah,
you so much, Emma, for that.
yeah.
Yeah, that was great.
Thank you.
And then we have Cameron here. And so we get to kind of peruse the work so far. I love this part, like going through everything. Um, and then here. So Cameron, can you tell us a little bit about this artist and why the materials they were using and maybe why you picked them?
Sure. So this is Louis Wayne. He was a artist during the 19th century and a little bit early 20th century. So what he did was he did a lot of like his whole thing was that his focus, his study, whatever you want to call it, was his subject. There we go. Were cats, and he was obsessed with them. And basically every piece you look up by him have cats in them. You know, even some of his early landscapes, they have cats in them. And it gets pretty obsessive at times when you look through his portfolio. And I like it because it's odd, for one, and like surreal. And he sort of, I don't know how to say this. He was ahead of his time when it came to psychedelica art too, because this is during the 19th century and 20th century. So this was psychedelica wasn't a
Mhm.
huge thing yet, but there's this whole theory behind uh, why he did all of these like extremely crazy coloring for some of his later works was because that there's three sort of or two uh, reasons that people theorize that caused him to do all of these like crazy colors. The first one is that he has schizophrenia, or he had schizophrenia, but that is highly debated because some people say he just had Asperger's, and he was admitted to a mental hospital for the later half of his life, and that's where we get a lot of like the crazier, I guess you would say, art pieces. And but then other people say that he simply had a liking to his mother's like wallpaper. And if you can see like in that middle piece there, is very reminiscent of like those ornate wallpapers and rugs that you'd see in old-fashioned homes and stuff like that. And he would use he'd had a lot of ink, pencil, watercolor, and gouache, and he'd rarely do oil, but sometimes he'd do oil pieces. But he mainly confined to watercolor and gouache and color pencils and ink too as well. And basically, he like I said, his main focus was on the cats, and he would also give them like human features. Basically, he'd make them like stand upright. He'd give them clothes. He'd give them human emotion, and which was extremely common in England at the time, is where he's from. Uh, because they would be on like postcards and little greetings that you'd send to people. So he'd take that and then he'd go beyond and he'd make like extremely elaborate pieces. Um, and yeah, I thought he was extremely like way ahead of his time. And I like what he does with his character work and how he gives them so much expression, despite what they originally are.
Mm-hmm.
And he just does so much with these characters, and you can almost tell a story behind some of these pieces when you look at them. And I highly recommend that you just look up his name and look up his art real quick, because some of the pieces are just like crazy. And yeah, I love it. It's fun. I like seeing it. He's got an interesting life story as well. He was doing really well for himself until he was 30, and then he had started having like nervous breakdowns and violent outbursts, and then he got admitted to the hospital, and then there his psychologist would basically give him like a small pad of paper and a couple of resources like watercolor and gouache, and that's where the psychedelic pieces you get come from. And then his psychiatrist would actually organize the pieces into books and then sell them and then give the profits back to Louis Wayne. So yeah, just interesting life story, interesting man, interesting pieces. I just like it.
Well, thanks for sharing about this artist. It's a very unique person, and it makes a lot of sense with all the characters that you create and work with. So, yeah, that kitty cat is crazy, right? That's amazing. What an amazing piece right there in the middle. All of them are really great. Um, you know, so thanks for sharing that with us, Cameron. Here we go. Yay, Rihanna. Get to tour the work.
Bye.
All right.
So for this project, I chose Vermeer. He was a Dutch painter who lived from 1632 to 1675, and the medium that he mostly worked in was oil on canvas. And these are three images that I just really loved of his. I think what really drew me to this artist is like the way, like the subjects and the kind of compositions are not super complex or abnormal. This is just kind of everyday life almost. Like in the first one, people are doing chores and nothing too crazy is happening, but there's just such an attention to detail in the way that he paints it that it makes it so like interesting to look at and just really captivating. So I really liked, like you can just, when you look at them, you can see how much time and like careful consideration of the way that even like the light moves, especially with the windows and just like all the materials are so thought out, like the way that it's kind of like brass on the table almost is depicted. So yeah, I just really liked, and this is kind of like a style that I definitely look up to. This like very um, just like the way that he composes the pictures and then this really like intricate detailing that he adds in. So I'm definitely excited to try oil because I really loved the style and the way that like the paint was put down and just the paintings were completed. So
Mhm.
That's beautiful. Thank you for that information and sharing that with us.
thanks.
All right. And these look great too. All right. I love touring the works. Every time I'll say it. All right.
So I picked James Naughton, and he's a contemporary landscape painter, and he was born in Britain. Um, I picked his work mainly because they were very expressive and emotive, and I felt like just looking at these paintings, it you could like feel like you were there and experiencing it, and I loved how he conveyed that. And he started professionally painting in 1998, and his paintings are based on light landscape and the nature of oil painting. Well, the nature of oil, and so he uses that to like express the feeling of the landscapes and really make you feel like you are there. He also doesn't sketch an initial outline, and he starts with oil. So I thought that was really cool how he just he doesn't need so much planning. He just paints and then expresses the landscape how he would like.
That's fantastic. What a great description. And yeah, they do really pull you right in there with the light and the darks. And the style of not really planning with pencil, that idea of kind of maybe planning it with paint a little bit, I think is great. And it's a great thing to try today with the Alla Prima painting. We will be giving that a go. So maybe it's very much in alignment with this type of painting. Um, I hope that's exciting today for you. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's beautiful. This is the one that you were working on. And it really, the two really, you can really see that. You can see the high contrast and the low contrast hand. It's all one hand, but you can see it perfectly. Good job.
Thank you.
All right. We have Maggie to do the tour. Love it. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Okay. Oop, cancel. Think I hit something wrong. There you are. There you
Oh,
are.
that's okay. Okay, cool. Yeah. So this is just, I'm not going to read this. We can,
Okay.
if you want to flip to the next one, I'll just tell you. I chose Jane Dixon, who's an American painter. She's alive. She's 68. And I believe she's still in New York, although who knows this week who's in New York. But anyway, she painted a lot of, she works on unusual surfaces because she's kind of, really explores and is very interested in different material and how there's sort of how it affects like how artificial materials and artificial light affects the human psyche. Like that's what comes out in her paintings a lot. And so one of her most famous series of paintings was from the 1970s up till up till today. I think she still even works in Times Square, although she no longer has a studio there. And I love her Times Square pieces from the 70s, 80s, 90s, where she also does a lot about like human, just, Times Square used to be really kind of seedy, but also there was like a huge like sexual transgressive like element to like how it was, how people maybe behaved or how it was interpreted. And so it's sort of a New York that I think is a little authentic, and something about now with COVID, and not to be, just to contextualize why I think it's really interesting. I think the fact that we're on screens all the time now, and her study of artificial light, which she also did in series that she did about the suburbs, where she painted these, I didn't include them here, but these really cool oil paintings, really large scale, of these suburban stores that have the same artificial light, and sort of like, you'll look at this one, Dobbs hats, and you see the artificial light and the sort of contrast between the human form, and they're very lyrical to me. Sorry, my Siri is talking back to me for some reason. And so it spilled over into other work. So it's not just the study of Times Square, but that's kind of what I chose to focus on here. And she worked with, she painted on AstroTurf and vinyl and all sorts of different materials to explore man-made, non-organic surfaces, and that with the artificial light obsession. I just think it really speaks to me. Especially as a New York person and New York lover, I like to look back at this art because it just, there's something in it that's really promising and mysterious, too, that I hope holds the test of time.
Oh, that's great. It's really beautiful. So these are some of the other pieces. Beautiful. Yeah, it's nice to think about those two combinations, like artificial, like plastic, and this artificial light, and then you see what you get, with all of those things, the gritty quality of it. And yeah, these are really beautiful paintings. The texture is so rich on them. Yeah. Probably for that reason. And the palm trees are just so happy there in the dark, just with the forms are.
They're okay. Yeah, we're not, but they are.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's really funny because I just love how tall they are, and how the painting just is like tall enough to have that sky view, the downstairs view too, the motorcycle and the TV and the light, porch light, and then maybe natural light from the sky, and then how it left just enough space just to capture that shadow of the palm tree is amazing. It's just really amazing. Those verticals, it's like these nice verticals and horizontals in this picture. Like, all, if you think about that, everything that's this way and this way, and how the composition makes it for a very interesting composition. This is beautiful. Thank you for sharing it with us, Maggie.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't think Meredith's here with us tonight, so I'm just gonna stop share and just check in. Yep. And then what I don't know if you had time to look over the PowerPoint that I put together. So I'm just gonna kind of pop that up really fast, as fast as I can go. And I think we'll just go through it, and then we'll just start painting. So this idea to have your supplies out. So whatever kits you have, I happen to have a lot of different types of oil paint, and I have a lot of different types of mediums for oil paint here. I don't know if everyone was able to get this Gamsol product, the gel solvent, or if you have Terp. If you have like, sometimes there's like turpentine, If you have, I didn't put it on, I don't think I put it on the list, but if you had any type of linseed oil or any type of mediums that you wanted to use, you're welcome to use them. And I normally have, like the brushes that I use, I normally have like a handful of brushes when I start to oil paint. For this, you might just start off with one brush to start to like think about where everything goes. But by the end of the painting, you'll want to have like a handful of different brushes to use. It makes it easy. And the Alla Prima painting, so when you think about what you want to paint tonight, it could be, I found an image that I just went for to do the example for class. And so what I did was I happened to tape my paper, but I taped it off. So I put, this is just watercolor paper, but I put matte medium on it and let it dry. Then I put some tape around it just to kind of make it a smaller piece. And this is an unfinished Alla Prima painting. It's just the beginnings of where I got to for the example. And so you can choose what you'd like to paint. Maybe it could be an inspiration from one of the artists that you picked. You know, you don't have to necessarily paint the whole painting of the artist. You could even zero in on like something that they did that you really love. It's like you could zoom very closely and maybe it's like Vermeer's picture or the cat's ear or you know, part of the lady standing there in the dark, you know, or part of the waterfall. Like, so you could think about it, if those images that you picked really kind of speak to you, you could use them in a way where you're using part, you know, you don't have to paint the whole thing as it looks like, but just part of it for inspiration. Or you could set up a still life or paint from a photograph or paint something from life that you like. There's always the hand, you know, there's always, if you wanted to paint from life, you could always take your hand and find some position that you can kind of keep looking at it from. You know, that's always one thing you could do. Or you could set up a mirror and look at yourself and paint that way. So there's lots of different choices. So I'm going to share my screen and hopefully, yeah, I will just pull up screenshot painting. Okay, I'll find it. And I hope you're not hearing like there's so much loud music happening in my neighborhood today. It's like a party outside. I don't know what's happening. Sometimes that happens on the streets here. Okay, so I'm gonna pull up this presentation. And this I will send, so you'll have this whole presentation. You'll have the link to all of our recorded videos and the link to the class slides. I'll at the end. I'll make sure that we have all the final ones. So if it's helpful to look back at these things, you can see so you've done so much with painting in 5 weeks. So, okay. It's like at this point, everything takes a while to load because there's so much information. But yeah, if you get your setup going, you know, if you have palette paper, your brushes, you can start thinking about where you want to go. And so I'm not going to read everything because there's some details in here that maybe you'll want to look at a little bit later. But this is just the idea of oil paint being different from everything else that we've used before. So it's just, you know, that oil paint consists of, I think it's always interesting to like know the ingredients of what you're using, like what is inside of there. It's like a base, an oil, like linseed oil, pigments, and maybe a solvent or a thinner or dryer or filler. There's like all these different types of things that could be inside the paint. And so that also helps you to determine the quality of the paint. If there's a lot of filler in it, maybe the colors don't feel as brilliant, or there's not as much pigment. The pigment load is a little bit less. And I do have a list of paints that, these are kind of like really top quality paints. If you start to love using oil paint, I would say the Old Holland would be for like a birthday present. That's like the most expensive oil paint, but it's beautiful stuff. It has so much pigment in it. And Gamblin is a very good quality oil paint, and it's not as expensive as Old Holland, but some colors will always be expensive because of the pigments that are inside of them. And so here, like if you really get into oil painting, just kind of talking a little bit about linseed oil and stand oil. So linseed oil, it comes in all kinds of like refined linseed oil. I have so much linseed oil, Blick linseed oil, all these different types. I have a safflower oil, which is good for cleaning brushes and sometimes using, some like, I have like stock and linseed oil here. So much linseed oil, but it's really great to use a little bit. It starts to sometimes, what it does is it makes the paint more liquidy. So if your pigment that comes out, and the pigments will all be different, they'll all have different characteristics. Some will be very buttery, some will be a little stiff. And so the linseed oil it will help it move around. And so if you did get this stuff, you could also use this instead of linseed oil. So it's just the solvent gel. You could just put a little dab in there and it'll start to open up the linseed oil. Stand oil is really great, but I don't normally put that on a class list unless it's an oil painting class. It really keeps things very clean. It doesn't yellow anything over time. And it's thicker. So it's just when you're like mixing acrylic paint, you might like it runnier, you might like it thicker. So these are just different ways you can figure out how to get the consistency of paint that you love to use. There's also these two links. Gamblin has so many videos. So if there's a technique that you're interested in, this is a great resource. Gamblin has so many resources. They're kind of like golden in a great way of educating how to use the paints that they make. Old Holland, there's nothing. It's just like, we're Old Holland, we have no videos. Whereas Gamblin, they'll help you out if you look at it. Okay, so there's a few different ways you can start an oil painting. We're gonna do the Alla Prima painting. But these are just some suggestions. So beyond this class, if you're interested in doing it, you could think or research on how to do it. One way is you could start to paint a background in and completely let that background dry. Maybe you really want a solid color or you want a gradation of a color. Sometimes it takes about a week for that to dry. You could paint a wash, which means you would put a lot of oil and a little bit of color, or turpentine, and you just take a big brush and like put a wash on the background. And then you can take a very clean brush or a rag and you can actually remove the paint and like kind of draw your way back in there as a way to start the painting. Then Alla Prima, which is what we're doing. Normally you would do that in one day, but we're using part of this day and part of Wednesday to do our painting. And glaze painting. Glaze painting is the longest technique of all of oil painting. There are so many different recipes on how to do it. With all oil painting, it's fat over lean. So you want to use thin washes of paint, and then you can build and build and build and build to thick paint. With the Alla Prima painting, it's kind of like we're throwing everything together. We will start off with those thin washes, and then you're kind of adding thicker and thicker and thicker paint to your surface to bring up color and texture. So I'm gonna just scoot ahead. So this is kind of like what I started to do. So this is just, I wanted to visually kind of show you this technique, and then I have more detailed slides with more information with other artists. So going to Cape Cod, I had this little like guide, it's like a guidebook of galleries and things like that. So I thought this artist, Jim Broussard, he made this Cape Cod house structure, which I thought was interesting. So what you're gonna do to start off your painting is have a very restricted palette. So there's only 4 colors here, and with those 4 colors, you can make quite a bit. And you're gonna give yourself kind of like a drawing, you're gonna kind of place around where things might go. In the middle here, you see that I've poured some of this refined linseed oil onto the color, or you could use some of this stuff. If you have a little bit of terp, you could also use a tiny bit of terp. If you're using terp, you definitely want to crack a window and make sure that you get some breeze, because oil paint can just be very heavy. It has a heavy smell. So if you're able to crack a window where you're working or have a fan on or something, that can be very helpful. So this is like this kind of step 1, and I just showed you how I taped it off. Okay, so step 2, then, it's kind of like placing around, blocking in where things might be. I started to think about that bush, that like green kind of bush in the middle. And I cropped this painting. I'm not painting the whole thing. I decided to just go in there and use a chunk of the painting to start to do this exercise. I didn't have any objects I really wanted to paint, so I went with this one. And I just like the angles and everything that was happening, and how much you can change colors with just a limited, restricted amount of colors. So that's kind of step 2, kind of placing things in. And with oil paint, if you get it wrong, I think I've made a discovery that I had one angle wrong. You can always just wipe it out with a paper towel. You could just take your brush and move it. So kind of getting these things in there, you kind of see how I'm now, Alla Prima is like, you're thinking about the whole painting. You're not focusing on one part of it. You got to kind of take your brush and start to think about everything that's happening. So you're hitting these little places with your brush, because you're going to start to build and build and build up the color and the structure and the everything. So this is just to show you, the importance of, at a certain point, you have to start somewhere, but then you're thinking about the totality of the painting and moving that color around. And oil paint is so easy to move around. It just wants to move around. And so here, I think I just added one more color to it. It was like an ochre yellow. And so that one color change, really started to brighten and add a little bit more to the painting. And the painting's not finished. This is just we'll probably get to this point this evening, but the thicker paint can be applied to this. So you can see how the thin paint was used, and then you can start to see here that I did use thicker paint. And when you have that thick paint on the painting, you can mix it as it's on the painting. So if you have you wanted to add some more colors, like around where maybe underneath the roof, make it like a little bit more dimensional. I could take a color, like a darker color, like a blue or green or something like that, and I could go under there and I could just mix it on the painting itself. So you could mix it on your palette, but you could also, with Alla Prima painting, you can go on there and just mix it right on the painting, and that works well too. So it's kind of this very loose, like moving around, You can mix on the painting, you can mix on your palette, and just it's just like you're starting to build color up, you're building color up. It's almost, we kind of start off kind of watercolory, or it's like, oh, let's put down like not so much at first, right? You kind of pick that one color where you're going to start to place and mark where you are in the picture plane, and then build it and build it and build it up. So here, this idea is like capture your initial impression of the subject. You can quickly cover the canvas with color. So this ensures you do not get caught up in the tiny details. So you don't want to like worry about the tiniest detail at first. You want to paint kind of very kind of blobby, like shapes, like thinking about the shapes, thinking about where they are located. And then this process allows you to tap into your instinctive painting skills, which is really helpful for painting. So this idea of trying to loosen up, try to free up a little bit. And you're not gonna use the thickest paint to start with, but it's this way of starting. So we looked at John Singer Sargent's watercolors. Here's a oil painting that he did. So the Hagia Sophia in Constantinople in 1891. So this was like, you can almost see, where this is an Alla Prima painting. So he went in there and you can see this use of yellow. So the yellow must have been in there. He must have been like putting it all over the painting, and you see that he's putting in the details a little bit later. He put the structure in there, and those details, they're not specifically like super rendered. It's just the brush and the general idea of what they are. Like the windows might not be perfect, right? The light is kind of coming in. So, but you can tell what's happening, even though it's not super clear or refined. The brushwork is really beautiful. So this is just saying, if you're mixing a dark color, which needs to go on top of a light color on the canvas, then make your dark color just a bit darker than it needs to be. If you're mixing a vivid red, which needs to go on top of a dull green, make sure your red is a touch more vivid than what it needs to be to compensate for any toning down. Because when you're coloring, when you're putting the color on top of another color, you might just have to use a really bright color because it's going to start to mix itself. If you start to move it around on top of another color, red and blue is going to turn purple. So you might have to think, if you want it to be brighter, use a bright color and it'll start to mix. And so we've kind of covered everything else here. Here's another Alla Prima painting. It's a George Bellows Blue Morning. Kind of thinking about the structure. And if you look in the background, where everything's in the background, it's almost like he took the palette knife and just scraped on paint. So everything in the foreground, we can see a little bit clearly, but in the background, it's not really that detailed. It's kind of, it's like showing us a hint of what's there, where the plains are of the city. And I love the structure at the top with the zigzag and this beam, and the texture of the grass that's down there, so you can see by using the brush, you can make all these textures really, really stand out. So here, this is just blah, 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 not too fast. So you can scrape away detail in the wet paint. So he's really showing us, you can scrape back in with your palette knife, or if you have a dry brush without anything on it, you could scrape back in, or you can even use the end of the brush to scrape back in and to draw something if you need to. And it's saying like, embrace, I like this part, embrace the unpredictable nature of your paint. So paint, it's sometimes unpredictable. You start to mix it around and you're like, oh, that did something completely different. But with that, it's kind of like an improvisation, so if you put too much down or it kind of turned a different color, just kind of embrace that maybe you're just supposed to be there with it. It might not have gone the way you wanted to, but what else can you do to it? What else can you add to it? And here is another John Singer Sargent wine glasses. very beautiful, Alla Prima painting. So this idea of like mixing wet onto the canvas, he definitely brought paint from underneath. Like that tablecloth is so beautiful. Like how many colors are in that tablecloth? It's like orange and blue, and it looks like a little bit of green maybe. Just so beautiful. And all these little marks, you know, to kind of make this trellis. You know, these are just like lines like this. And then he went back in and put the, you know, foliage around just in the branches. It's just so beautiful, and where the light is hitting the ground. So this is, yeah, I think we talked about this already. Okay, and so I just wanted to show you Marlene Dumas's work. She's a painter. What I wanted to show you her work is because she was painting faces, and they're very kind of quick studies of faces. So she was doing it in ink and watercolor, and then in oil paint too. So kind of seeing this translation of that she was using all these different mediums to get to her faces. And she was born in South Africa and attended Cape Town University, and then she went to the Netherlands and studied art. And so I just thought that these were great, like all these different faces on paper. So the faces aren't like perfect, you know, they almost look like different characters or, you know, where they are, but, you know, kind of, and this is the watercolors. So this is like a watercolor study. You can see how things are bleeding, how things are kind of left a little bit unfinished, like how the hair is described is interesting. It's not very detailed. Some might like feel like it's in shadow. This is a painting of a self-portrait. So her face isn't perfect, but you kind of see where her study is like letting the materials kind of move around. She's also done this with oil paint. So the oil paint, like the strokes of the hair are really wild, and like where the shirt is and the ear, and it's kind of all in different, you know, it's not a perfect face, but it has this expression to it, which is really interesting. Here's a close detail of one of the watercolors. It's really quite beautiful. Just those like simple marks and how she let things bleed and where the eyes are and the mouth and lips, just really beautiful. I had to put this one in because it just was so angry and I loved it. You know, just this like red lipstick, you know, it's like a mess a little bit, like maybe the eye makeup is running, but like how fantastic this person, you know, she captured this feeling completely with this. And then I think there's one more. Yeah, it was kind of an angry face. This one's a little pixelated, but I thought it was great. You know, sometimes, you know, showing all these different expressions, you have, you know, there's a variety of different things. But I thought, excuse me, that her work would be kind of fun to show, and that something like this would count for a painting. So if you were, you know, looking to do a face, you could also do that, because we've done a lot of portraiture in this kind of wildly expressive way. If you, you know, but again, you could do a landscape, you know, kind of anything that you might be interested in. I'm going to stop sharing this and kind of check in to see what you guys are interested in painting today, and if there's any questions. Does anyone know what they're painting, going to start to work on, subject-wise? Not yet? You do, Emma?
Yes. How if I don't have linseed oil?
It's okay. If you don't have linseed, do you have any turpentine?
None also.
No. That's okay. If you don't
Actually, it's my first time to, you know, to use watercolor. So I really don't know at all.
To use the, okay. So
yeah.
it'll just come out, and you know, it might be a little bit thicker, but that's okay. You know, so if you don't have linseed oil, that's okay. I wouldn't recommend using like olive oil, because that will just never dry.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
I know.
Maybe the available oil here. I have sesame oil.
Canola, it will move it around for sure, but it might never, your painting might never dry. But you could try it out, but it will
Yeah.
never dry.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, so if you don't have terps or you don't worry about it. Just kind of try to keep it, when you're first putting it all down, just try to keep the painting light. And then Alla Prima,
Okay, okay.
use what we can, because I'm pretty sure someone's been out in nature and they brought all their
Okay.
paints that didn't have linseed oil. So
Mhm,
yeah, we
mhm.
can definitely work with it. Yeah.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, and you can just set up a palette, these big paintings, how I showed you in that picture, I just had like 4 colors. So restricted like 2 to 4 colors at the most to start with. Just have,
Okay.
you know, looking at what you're going to paint and you think like, okay, I'm probably going to use this range of color. Just keep it very minimal to start off with. That way it won't
Okay.
be overwhelming, and you'll start to understand how it starts to move around. It's very
Okay.
fast.
Mhm.
Yeah, it starts to move very
Yeah.
fast.
I'm excited because it's first time, to use watercolor.
Enjoy it.
Yeah, yeah.
The oil, yes, yes. All right, does anyone else know what they're painting or they're confused? I'm happy to be a guide there.
No, well, Melissa, I might have to break away right now because I have to go do some chores for my family, and then I
Sure.
also have to do homework for school. Do you
Okay.
mind if I break away earlier?
Yeah,
Right
that's
now?
fine. Of course, Cameron. Yeah.
Okay.
Do you know what you're
Thank
gonna
you.
paint? Do you know what you're gonna paint?
No, but I'll think of it soon.
Okay. Okay. Cool. And we're gonna continue this project. Whatever we're painting, we're gonna continue with it on Wednesday.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye, Cameron. Um, hey, Maggie, how are you doing?
Good. I was gonna do that El Nino motorcycle because I love the sky, the one that we talked about, the Jane Dixon. I just thought I would do a copy
That's
for
great.
my yeah. I think I liked that one. So that's my plan. If I can print the image, which I'm trying to hook my printer up, then I'll be good to go.
Okay, cool. Sounds awesome.
Yeah.
And I know you might jump off at any point, but I think,
Yeah.
just feel free to, if you need to check in before you leave, that's cool. Or if not, we'll see you on Wednesday. I know you got
Okay.
a household there.
Yeah, we got a lot going on. Okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome,
Okay.
Maggie. Go ahead.
Okay. Appreciate it.
No problem. All right. Let's see. So I think what we can do is I'm here, and then at I think we should just check in. It's 7:30, 8:30. Let's check in around 8:30 just to see how it's going with the painting. We'll just check in midpoint.
Melissa.
Yes.
Hi. Sorry. I just realized I have to restart my computer in order to make the printer work. So if I do that and I want to stay and paint for a little bit, can you just let me back in the Zoom?
Yeah, you can.
Okay.
Yeah, if you exit out, you can always come back with the
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
That's what I'm going to do. Thank you so
cool.
much. Okay.
Thanks.
Melissa, yeah, I have thinner here. So what should I do with this? The thinner for oil. So what's the use of this?
Okay, so that looks like paint thinner, which can be helpful if you get like, you might want to pour it in like a small cup of some kind, just
Yes, yes.
like a tiny, tiny bit. And then what you could do is just, if the paint feels too chunky, you can add a little bit
Mm.
of it to the paint. It's almost like water, but
Uh-huh.
you don't want to add too much of it, just a little bit to get it moving. So you don't want to like
Okay.
dump a bunch on
Okay.
there, because
Understand.
it'll also take a long time to dry, which seems silly.
So when we use the watercolor, so we don't need water to, to add on it. So
Um,
we don't need water at all.
for oil paints, these are
Yes,
the oil
yes.
paints. No water is needed unless you purchased water soluble oil paint.
Yeah.
Do you have water soluble oil paint, or is it just regular oil paint? What is your two?
The regular oil paint.
Regular. Okay.
This.
Oh yeah, those are great paints.
Yeah.
So if you so you'll want to you could try it without the thinner to start with.
Yeah.
And if you notice like it just doesn't feel right, then you could add a little bit to it. Why I say wait on the thinner is just because of the fumes. The fumes can sometimes, it can just be a little bit strong.
Yeah.
So if you don't have to use that, the thinner will be really great to rinse to get the oil out of the brushes at the end. But if you're just like need to thin it a little bit too, it'll also be helpful. But it's good to like not breathe that stuff in as much as possible. So
That's right.
it's like it's good to try it out, and for tonight you'll be okay. But if you crack a window or you have a door open or something, because sometimes it just is a little stinky and it smells bad. But it's I was painting for the project, and it's funny, like as soon as I opened the linseed oil, like my head started to hurt. I was like, oh yeah, all the smells, all the oil paint smells are strong. I forgot. So I had my window way open, to air it out.
Yeah.
So if it starts to bother you, just know that it's it's just,
I have mask.
you have a mask. Ha ha! Just put the mask on. Exactly. So hard.
Yeah, I have here at my back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's helpful.
Sure, I will try. I'm so excited.
Yay!
For a
Yay!
first timer.
Yay!
I hope everything will be fine.
Yes, it will be. You're gonna do great. And it's
Yeah, I will be like Picasso.
yeah. If you just make sure you have a paper towel around, because
Yeah, I have.
okay, good.
Yeah, I have that rag on my table, so just in case it's wet or whatever.
Yeah.
Then I have to clean it right away.
It's definitely quite messy.
Yeah.
And these won't be dry by Wednesday. They'll still be wet. Like the painting.
So I should really start now.
They'll be wet for at least a week, sometimes two. Sometimes it depending on the weather, it takes oil paint a long time to dry. So what I do is I take my painting and I just put it somewhere where it can just be, and no one, like my cat isn't gonna jump in it, or I'm gonna sit on it by accident. All these things that are possibilities in my small apartment. So
That's right.
I'll have a new type of pants if I sit in it. So yeah. But that's the only other part of oil painting.
Yeah, sure.
But let me know how it goes with the thinner. If you start to use it, I hope you feel okay with that. Ariana, how are you doing?
I'm doing well.
Yeah.
I mean, I like just put out my paints, so I
Okay,
haven't.
good. Are you using thinner or any type of solvent with the paint?
We have like a small thing of linseed oil, so I'm using that.
Okay, linseed oil. Okay, perfect,
Yeah.
perfect, perfect. That's great. And then,
And I'm using this type, I don't know if you can tell, this type of brush. It's like pretty like coarse and bristly,
yeah,
but
that'll
okay,
work really good. That's
okay.
perfect. I know exactly what you have. Yeah, I like to use these types of brushes for oil paint. I feel like it holds the paint, even though like a synthetic brush, I also have synthetic brushes that I use too, because
Mhm.
these can be very smooth and make like very smooth transitions. So even like the Vermeer, even though we're doing Alla Prima, like
Yeah.
the idea of like doing kind of smooth transitions, sometimes they both will work. They both
Okay.
will work. This one, it just happens to be like this one's going to give you more bristly marks, and this will be very, very extra smooth.
Mhm.
Um, and sometimes like having what I don't have out is like having like a like a like a a brush where you can kind of make lines.
Oh,
So
yeah.
if you need a little bit of a like you can also just take your brush and go like this way. That's what I do normally. But if it's
Okay.
like the skinny brush, whatever skinny brush you have might be helpful for the later part of putting details in, can come in handy. Or if you're just trying to draw something, you can also take the end of the brush and like if you're trying to figure out where something goes and just draw it in, and then go back and smooth it. So if you
Okay.
don't want the texture, you can always just, which is the brilliant part with oil paint, you can kind of really make it do whatever you want. If that's helpful. And what is it that are you going to do what is it called? Um, landscape or a still life or,
I'm kind of doing like the Vermeer, the milkmaid kind of, but like it's like a picture of Cerise. So, but it's like in the similar like style and like the way like it's like a portrait, but from kind of further away. So.
that's so cool that you're painting Cerise. That's so awesome. I
Thanks.
love it. I love it. Very cool. Is she going to paint your portrait too?
I don't think so.
No, okay. All right, yeah. Very, very cool. Thank you very much
Thank you.
for explaining what you're up to. Okay, so let's paint. I'm just gonna check back in with everyone at 8:30 just to see how it's going. And I mean, from now until then, if you just kind of figure out where things go on the painting, like you don't have to have anything finished by then by any means. Like you can go slow, and really take your time and think about where things go and like think about the planes of stuff, because with oil paint we can always put another layer on top of it, and change the plane or change the direction of something. Even with this painting that I did this afternoon, I could take a rag and like wipe it all off. That is a possibility, because it's still very wet. So I'll check in at 8:30 just to see how we're doing, and then check in again a little bit later too. So I'm going to put myself on mute and just let me know if you have questions.